Black Friday 2025. You probably saw the headlines, right? They were screaming about record-breaking sales, painting this picture of a super strong American consumer. But was it real? Today, we're going to follow the money and uncover the real story hiding behind those giant numbers. And here's the number that kicked it all off. A massive, record-shattering $11.8 billion in online sales alone. I mean, wow. On the surface, that looks like shoppers were out there spending like never before. But this is where our mystery really begins. Because it all boils down to this one crucial question. Did we actually buy more stuff, or did we just end up paying a lot more for less? The answer, as you're about to see, changes absolutely everything. So let's start peeling back the layers. Because this record, as impressive as it sounds, it's pretty deceptive. It's hiding a much more complicated and, frankly, a much more concerning reality about the state of the economy. And believe me, the big numbers just kept on coming. You had Salesforce reporting $18 billion, MasterCard saw a 4.1% jump in retail spending. Everything, literally everything, seemed to be pointing to a confident, free-spending consumer. But the details tell a totally different story. And boom, this quote right here gets to the absolute heart of it. This growth wasn't real. It wasn't people buying more things. It was, and I quote, a function of monetary inflation. In other words, prices just went way up. And that's our first big clue. Which leads us right down our first trail of evidence, inflation. We're looking at what analysts are calling an inflationary mirage. It's like a trick of the numbers, where higher prices make it look like we're all spending more, even when we're walking out of the store with less in our bags. Okay, now look at this. This data from Salesforce pretty much blows the whole story wide open. Yeah, sure, dollar sales went up 3%, but look closer. The average price of things jumped 7%. And here's the real kicker. The total number of orders actually fell, and the number of items in each of those orders dropped too. You know what it's like? It's just like filling up your car. The receipt shows this huge number, maybe the most you've ever paid for gas. But then you look at the gauge, and you realize you barely got half a tank. We paid more to get less. So, if people were buying fewer items, how on earth did spending hit a record? Well, that leads us right to our next clue. And that brings us to clue number 2, the debt engine. See, this record-breaking spending spree wasn't fueled by savings or bigger paychecks. Nope, it was powered by something else entirely. A massive, and I mean massive, surge in consumer debt. Let's talk about the secret weapon of this whole shopping season, Buy Now, Pay Later, or BNPL. Just think of it like a modern layaway plan, but you get to take the item home right away and pay it off in chunks. It became the absolute go-to tool for millions of shoppers this year. And the growth was just explosive. On Black Friday alone, BNPL usage shot up almost 9%, driving nearly $750 million in spending. And let's be really clear here. For a lot of families, this wasn't about convenience. It was a lifeline. Now, combine that BNPL surge with this absolutely staggering number. Americans came into the holidays already carrying a record $1.23 trillion in credit card debt. This means people weren't choosing BNPL instead of their credit cards. They were stacking debt on top of debt, often turning to these new services precisely because their credit cards were already totally maxed out. And what all of this really points to is not a sign of economic strength, but a giant flashing red light. It's a symptom of severe financial strain on the average household. But here's the thing. This strain wasn't felt by everyone, which leads us to our final clue. Our final clue reveals the Great Divide, because this wasn't just one Black Friday for all of America. Oh no, this was a tale of 2 Black Fridays for 2 very, very different types of shoppers. And right here, you can see that divide in stark relief. On one side, you've got the affluent top 20% kind of insulated by their wealth, spending freely on luxury goods. They're the ones who really propped up those headline numbers. But on the other side, you have the bottom 80%, who are increasingly dependent on debt, trading down to cheaper store brands, and just feeling the full force of inflation. And we saw proof of this struggle in the real world too. Foot traffic in actual stores was down, again. The people who did go out weren't just browsing, they were on a mission. They went in for one specific pre-researched deal and then they got out. The days of the big, impulse buy shopping spree, they're pretty much over for most people. So let's recap. You've got inflation masking the fact that we bought less stuff, and you've got a mountain of debt fueling the spending that did happen. It all leads to one single alarming question. What happens when the bills for this record-breaking party finally come due? So, what's the final verdict on all this? Well, analysts are calling it a Pyrrhic victory. That means retailers won the battle for Black Friday 2025, but in doing so, they might have lost the war for 2026, setting the stage for a really brutal spending hangover. And looking ahead, experts see this potential perfect storm brewing for early 2026. First, all that holiday debt from BNPL and credit cards comes due in January. Second, some of that spending was just people buying things early to avoid future tariffs, so that demand is just gone now. And third, a weakening job market is set to hit these same indebted households the hardest. When you put all the pieces together, you finally see the truth. Black Friday's record wasn't real growth. It was basically an accounting trick. Retailers simply borrowed sales from the future to make today's numbers look good. So we're left with this. Yes, Black Friday 2025 broke all the records, but it was a record built on a mirage of inflation and financed by a mountain of debt. The real question isn't how much we spent, but what it's ultimately going to cost the consumer and the economy when that bill finally arrives.